What if I told you that one of the most powerful automotive brands in the world once stood on the edge of complete destruction? A company that today defines luxury, precision, and engineering excellence was once forbidden from doing the very thing it was created for. This is not just a story about cars. This is a story of survival, of reinvention, and of an idea that refused to die. Today, BMW stands as a global symbol of performance, innovation, and status. But its journey did not begin on the road. It began in the sky. The story takes us back to 1916. In the middle of World War I, at that time, Germany was heavily invested in aviation technology, and companies were racing to build more powerful, more reliable aircraft engines. BMW, originally formed from companies like Rapp Motor and Werke, focused entirely on building aircraft engines. These engines were not ordinary. They were designed to perform at high altitudes, where oxygen levels were low and conditions were extreme. BMW engineers developed technologies that allowed their engines to maintain power, even in those harsh conditions. This gave them an advantage. And quickly, BMW built a strong reputation for engineering excellence. Their engines powered German aircraft during the war, and demand continued to grow. For a moment, it seemed like BMW was on the path to unstoppable success. But history had other plans. So in 1918, we went through World War I. Back then, Germany won, and the aftermath was tough. It left us with some significant impacts. One of the most memorable events happened with the Treaty of Versailles. This treaty imposed strict restrictions on Germany's military capabilities, And out of those restrictions, there was this big ban. We couldn't make any aircraft engines anymore. This was a huge blow, and it affected our business model totally. We were the company that's all about one product, and suddenly we couldn't make it anymore. Factories had to close down, and orders just vanished. Our revenue dropped to nothing, making us a struggling company. BMW was no more the big growing company we used to be. It turned into a company that's fighting to stay alive. A lot of companies around us just stopped existing. But BMW made a different decision. They opted to make the most of what they had still. Their engineering skills, their mechanical know-how, and their amazing team. They started experimenting and creating smaller-sized engines, like for agricultural equipment and other stuff. These weren't the type of things you see every day, but they kept us going. That time wasn't all about achieving success. It was about surviving and finding a way to keep on living. And of course, surviving is the first step towards something bigger. As the 1920s began, BMW was still searching for a stable identity. The company had survived the immediate crisis. But survival alone was not enough. They needed direction. They needed purpose. And most importantly, they needed a product that could define their future. It was during this uncertain period that BMW made one of the most important decisions in its entire history. They entered the motorcycle industry. At first, this may have seemed like a small step, but in reality, it was a turning point. In 1923, BMW introduced its first motorcycle, the R32. This machine was unlike anything else at the time. It featured a flat twin boxer engine, mounted horizontally. This design allowed better balance, better cooling, and greater stability. But that was not all. Instead of using a chain drive, BMW used a shaft drive system. This made the motorcycle more durable, more reliable, and easier to maintain. These innovations set BMW apart from competitors, and for the first time since the war, the company was no longer just surviving, it was innovating. The R32 was not just a product, it was a statement. BMW was back, and it was ready to move forward. By the late 1920s, BMW had gained confidence. The success of its motorcycles gave the company stability, but BMW was not satisfied. They wanted more. They wanted to enter a bigger market, the automobile industry. In 1928, BMW took a bold step. They acquired a company called Fahrzeugfabrik Eisenach. This factory was already producing small cars, and with this acquisition, BMW officially entered the world of automobiles. Their first car, the BMW 315, was based on the British Austin 7. It was not luxurious, It was not powerful, but it was practical, affordable, and efficient. For BMW, this was not about dominance. It was about learning, understanding car production, improving design, building experience, step by step. BMW was developing its identity, an identity that would later change the automotive world. But just as things were improving, the world once again moved toward chaos. So, as the 1930s rolled around, the whole world seemed to be on the verge of fights and war. Europe was bustling with tension. And then, well, World War II started, For BMW, that was a great comeback story, Picking up where we left off in aircraft engine making, the company went straight to work on military planes again. Their production soared fast, factories running at full speed. But hey, this time it took some serious hits, because when the war is over in 1945, Germany had a lot of wounded and crumbling cities, Busted infrastructure and everything else you can think of. BMW wasn't left out of it. They too had some pretty bad scares, Several of their factories got really damaged, and some even lost their whole structures, Production stopped, operations came to a halt, At this point, the company wasn't even thinking about expanding, They were just trying to stay alive and keep things going, And to make things worse, BMW's main factory in Eisenach. So, in the late 1940s, BMW was going through some tough times. Yeah, they were pretty dark times. It was a really tough period for the company. They didn't have a lot of stable production going on. Their finances were not too strong. They had some really limited resources. At one point, they even started making bicycles, a lot of household items like baskets and small tools. It wasn't really part of their original vision. But they needed the income, No matter how small the order was, it was important for them to have income. They weren't in the mood for much innovation at this point. They needed to survive. But BMW didn't give up just yet. They tried to come back into the car world with some luxury vehicles. They made some beautiful cars like the BMW 501. These cars were really pretty, but they were expensive, and the market was just starting to recover. As a result, sales were really low. The costs were still high, and things only got worse. Once again, BMW found themselves in financial trouble. The company was trying to move forward, but they weren't fast enough. And another crisis was coming their way. By the late 1950s, stuff was pretty crazy around BMW too. They was into heavy investments in all sorts of luxury cars, like the 501 and 502. These cars were some of the coolest things, right? Made with top-notch workmanship, But they were pretty pricey too, and demand wasn't there. But hey, they made some smaller cars too, like the Isetta. These helped tickle some money in their portfolio, but it wasn't enough. The company was struggling, and by 1959, they were literally on the edge of bankruptcy. They had some serious talks about selling the whole company, But then out of nowhere, this major automaker came to the party and tried to own them. It was almost like BMW was going to disappear, But then something amazing happened. At a crucial shareholder meeting, some tiny little shareholders stood up and fought against the takeover. The employees, the supporters, and even some of the bigger fans also stood their ground. And thanks to the Quandt family, who stepped in with a big investment, BMW was saved. They had a second chance to change the way they were going forward. Now they can finally move forward and redefine their future. After going through the tough times, BMW realized one thing: it needed a fresh start. The old plan was not working, so the company made a bold move. Instead of concentrating just on luxury, they went for funky, mid-sized vehicles, cars that bring together performance, expertise and practicality, and sleek design of now. Back in the 1960s, BMW first came up with the new class. Starting with kits like the 1500, these vehicles were unique. They provided impressive performance, swift handling, plus an up-to-date appearance. Customers had a blast with them. For the very first time in ages, BMW saw a significant surge in sales. They turned out to be profitable once again. Even more important, BMW found their identity, a brand centered around the driving experience. This wasn't just a bounce back. This was an all-new change. So, from the 70s on, you get the picture, right? BMW kept on growing. They expanded globally. New guys were brought in. New stuff came out. Each one giving top-notch performance and making sure you had a blast while cruising. While this was happening, BMW also turned into a brand you can't miss. They got famous as the ultimate driving machine. And that's how it started. BMW didn't just make cars anymore, they became a cutting-edge performance brand, a symbol of how successful they were. As time went by, BMW added more to their lineup, from tiny cars to top-of-the-line sedans and sports cars. And they even stepped into the racing world. That just added another layer to their reputation as a company that knows how to think outside the box. Their never-ending innovation, improved technology, and being among the most respected names in the automotive world just solidified it for me. So today, check out the big cars we have, BMW included. We've got a global brand here, you know. They're famous for coming up with new stuff, you know. They make everything from fancy cars to electric cars, you know. Now let me tell you, BMW has been through some tough times. It was even near bankruptcy once, yo. But they never gave up, you know. They adapted and changed, and now they're even stronger, you know. See, that's the thing, yo. Persistence and a clear vision can really make a difference, you know. From the sky to the road, they've been everywhere, you know. And hey, they even made it to the top, you know. That's the power of persistence, yo. And the power of a clear vision, you know. From survival to global dominance, they never disappoint, you know. That's not just some old story, you know. That's seriously inspiration, yo. Check out Chronicles of Excellence and see how they turn things around, you know.